Welcome to Architects of Imagination, where we talk to the brilliant minds behind your favorite video games. Today, I would like to introduce my friend, our guest, Mr. Ryan Duffin.
Yay!
How you doing,
Brilliant
Ryan?
minds, and somehow I snuck in here. Oh, my hat's too tight from being so brilliant.
Fuck yeah. Ryan, it would take a while to rip through his resume, but he has worked on a ton of amazing games that you've played, you've heard of. Many of the Battlefield games, 3, 4, 5, Star Wars Battlefront, Medal of Honor Warfighter. He's worked on a couple of Spider-Man, Minority Report, Alan Wake, Call of Duty 2, The Incredible Hulk. Am I missing any? What are
I think you covered most of. I mean, some of those I had like a very tiny part in. I was laughing at like, oh yeah, is the plural for multiple Spider-Man games Spider-Men? Yeah, some of the old ones, not the newer ones, which are very cool. And a lot of the guys from Medal of Honor Warfighter, a lot of the folks from Medal of Honor Warfighter, went on to be a big chunk of that animation team. So.
Awesome. And we should mention Ryan here is an animator. You did first-person animation for shooters for quite a while, and tons of other kinds of animation. Tell us if do you have a favorite of all the projects that you've worked on?
Favorite in like to play or that I am proud of?
Either.
Okay.
Both.
So I guess my favorites would be Alan Wake and Battlefield 4. I think.
Awesome.
Battlefield. Alan Wake was the first single-player game that I worked on that I played through after we shipped, and it was just like I was. It's not that my animation part of it was like super exciting or complicated or anything like that, but it was just I was really fortunate to be part of that team. Like that was just like a good, tight team, a super professional production, and a special game in the end. And then Battlefield 4, like I can still jump in there and do pretty good.
Yeah,
I
nice.
think there was a sort of heyday of live service plus community relations that I would just be on like the Reddit, the subreddit for Battlefield 4 every day, and people would be like, "Hey, I found a bug," and then it's like a month later, it's gone. I even fixed an animation. There was an animation from Battlefield 3 that was like had one little thing that bothered me, and then like a year after BF4 launched, I was like, "Oh, I could just fix it," and I did. So it was pretty cool. So
that's pretty rad, right? Where you can get in and have some determination.
Yeah, it was nice. So I think those are the two. I'm proud of a lot of them, but those are the two that I think are most special to me.
And Remedy, I regard them as one of the best teams in the world. I think the games they do are just groundbreaking and incredible. That's awesome that you got to work with those guys. And you were up in Helsinki.
I lived in Helsinki for a year and a half.
Awesome.
I think a lot of the and this is not tooting my horn because it's their horn, but Remedy is a great example to me of a AAA studio that has there's clearly like a vision of a person in it, and it's like when I saw Controls Art Direction, I'm like, I know who did that, and that's perfect for him. And it's just like I think a lot of the scale of AAA can kind of water down how clearly like a person has seen a thing, and so I think Remedy pulls that off really well.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Like I think about the scale of games today and how the sort of difference between something that is like focus tested, is kind of driven by committee almost, versus like a single auteur, like when you've got sort of a genius behind the helm, right? And it's kind of easy to see, like, I think in movies today too, like there's certain directors, like you're just going to go see what they make, Christopher Nolan and I don't know. I feel like movies have kind of gotten watered down these days and are kind of a committee affair. And the same holds true of games too, right? there's just so big. I think of the Call of Duty games, too. That since I worked on those. I think in the earlier days they were, there was sort of like a very clear vision and a strong, point person behind that, and they're just massive scaled things these days.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's a tough one, and it's like, I mean, I think we've definitely seen it happen in film. I've some of the discourse has been about around authorship, and it always goes back to like, oh, that shitty guy who treated his staff like shit, and it's always a guy, but and that's not what I think anybody's defending, but like when you have like Sam Lake or Hideo Kojima, and it's like, yeah, you couldn't. To me, that's like you couldn't make one of those games if you tried. If you had all like copy that style, people would know that it's a style. And it doesn't mean that like that person made the game by themselves. It just means that the game was led by a singular creative vision. And singular does not mean like Sam Lake wasn't over my shoulder like, "Hey, can you make that run up the stairs animation better?" Like that's not how it works.
Yeah, yeah,
It is a position that is exploitable by tyrants, and I think there are people in the industry who feel like they should have that title who haven't necessarily earned it, and they're like, oh, everything would be fine if you just gave me total control, and that's probably not the solution either. But I think there's something to be said for having like a person's vision driving the high level of a game.
yeah. And I kind of pictured too, like it's hard to inject that in older big studios, right? That I kind of imagine that often comes up sort of from the ground, right? People going and starting their own
Hmm.
companies, and essentially like doing it the way that they want to.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, that's how how do you even get that role in a modern studio? It's like maybe I think for a while Ubisoft had something of a model like that. It's like that people high up would be like, okay, this is your game to direct, but you can also see that like there's clearly a recipe book there and probably a certain allowance on how much the vision can deviate from the formula.
yeah, yeah. Um, Now we worked on two of the bigger competing franchises
Uh
at the
huh.
same moment in time.
Want to
You
fight?
were making Battlefield. Well, I was making Call of Duty. So which is it, Battlefield or Call of Duty?
I mean, it depends. They're both great. Like I've I've told there was Modern Warfare was like the original Modern Warfare was super influential to me, both in first person animation. I've told Mark Grigsby this, animation director at Infinity Ward, that like, oh yeah, this that changed my thinking of like, oh, the magazine is coming out of a chest pouch. It's not coming out of just off the safe frame. And it's like, oh, once you see that, regular first person animation looks stupid. Like once you see like, it's like you just, huh, huh. I
Yeah.
hate that. And it was like that. So COD changed that for me. And before I worked on Battlefield, I mean, I have a lot of hours in Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 on the Xbox 360. I love those games. And so when I started working on Battlefield, like, yeah, there was some influence in the way that I did the reload animations. Um, but also they're different play styles. I mean, yeah, jump into COD and it's like more, it's a little twitchy. It's a little like there's not a lot of tactical stuff. It's just like it's a sport. It's a super high energy sport. Battlefield, at its best, is a little more tactical, a little more paper scissors rock, a little more like I don't even like running around with a sniper rifle. Um, I'm just gonna get in a tank. I'm just gonna camp this tank the whole
Yeah.
match, and or yeah, people do it with helicopters and stuff like that. So it's just they're different kind of games for different. I don't think it's like a one or the other. It's not a Ford versus Chevy. It's like they do different things. It's more like a this is not to compare one to one or one to the other, so I'll not define those. But it's like more like a Corvette to a Bronco or a Jeep. It's like these are different
Yeah, they have
purposes.
different functions for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can enjoy them
I'll,
both.
I'll admit I've never gotten into a Battlefield game, unfortunately.
You lost, man.
The couple times that I tried, you know, and maybe this is lazy me. Any shooter you play is going to have some sort of like ramp in time where you're acclimating to the controls. You're just going to get killed over and over again. And I think the thing that bummed me out with Battlefield was I'd call it like run and die. Like I'd spawn in, like run across the map,
Yeah.
get sniped. Fuck. Okay, do that again. And I just never got to a place where I was operational. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I have there's something in games we call a shelf moment, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, and it's I have a very low tolerance for when I hit shelf moments, but
Totally fair. Yeah, it is not a game that welcomes new players very well. And there's a whole lot of like, I don't know what this does, and it's like, oh, you didn't go on the community fan site that told you how this thing works. It's like not even an EA page, and yeah, so there's a fair amount of that. I think okay, so one like a brilliant thing about the first Modern Warfare, and this is actually a tie into Alan Wake. I was working on Alan Wake. I was doing a lot of late nights there, and Remedy, which was much smaller, I think we were 50 people at the time. We had frozen dinners in the fridge, in the freezer. Frozen dinners. So I would like at night. I was working a lot of late nights, and I would do a frozen dinner, and I would jump on the Xbox in the Remedy kitchen, and Modern Warfare. I was like, I pop this in. It's not my account. It's Remedy's account, so it's level 1, and I was like, level 55 at home. I jump in at level 1, but the game is so well balanced that the M16A3, the first one you start with, it's like that's the best gun.
yeah.
For like it's not like there are specialty other things where like in Battlefield you kind of start with like the shitty gun and then you'll never use it again once you've unlocked a better one. But I was like level 0 with a lot of experience, and I would clean up. I would just like I have the starting gear. There is no I haven't been rewarded for my advancement. I'm just like this is so well balanced that all these guys are getting their asses kicked by a level 0 guy, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was very intentional too. That the strongest weapon in the game was the starting one.
Yeah.
So that like as you progress, it's like you have more options now. You have more play styles. So if you want to go, close combat or range or whatever, that's the sort of thing that you're unlocking. But just out the gate, at all ranges, it is totally functional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
much more accessible than Battlefield, and the way. Yeah, we probably could have done progression a little bit better and a little friendlier to new players.
I had the privilege to go up and get a tour of Remedy. They had me up to Helsinki, and man, what a great crew! Their effects team, I think, is one of the best in the world. One fond memory, saunas are a big thing.
Oh yeah,
in Finland, they have one installed at the studio. A lot of people have them in their houses. And they took me to one of the nicer ones there, and it was so hot. And I remember running from the sauna into the Baltic Sea, and just like ice cold. Like you're not far from the Arctic Circle up there, and going the extreme hot and cold. That was a pretty awesome experience.
So you know what question's coming next?
What's that?
Did you wear the towel or not?
I almost opened with that. I was the only not naked person in there. My puritanical American ass was not ready to get naked in front of a bunch of dudes.
I think it was
and
like
you?
my going away for the longest time. It was swim trunks, and then it was towel, and then like by the time I left, by the going away party for the contractors, I went naked in the Remedy sauna at their old office, and I did it like one other time, but it's still like I don't like this. I don't. It was just
it's a different like cultural thing, right?
I respect the hell out of it, and I hate that we are that ashamed of our bodies, but that is our.
Yeah, and I was always a very shy kid. Yeah. Let's talk animation. Who do you think is setting the bar for best animation in games today?
I mean, I think Naughty Dog's the obvious one, and that's like I always poke at that when I'm interviewing people 4 animation jobs. It's like, oh, if they answer that, it's like, yeah, it's right, but it's easy. It's
Yeah.
like, um, but yeah, I mean, I think there's setting the bar specifically. I would say Naughty Dog. Like there is an attention to animation that a lot of studios just sort of overlook. I think that that's clearly a priority for that studio and the animators they hire. I've worked with a lot of former Naughty Dog people. They are all exceptional, and it's just like it's in their values. And a lot of studios, it's not. Or thinking that like, oh, let's make it look like Naughty Dog after we've done all the other stuff, and then you'll just sort of reskin it later with good animation, and that's like it's too late to fix it at that point. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
that's kind of key part of it is like how integrated animation is in the thing, and not just this old school like, oh, it's slow and pretty or it's snappy and shitty. It's like you find a balance for the game you're making, and they seem to do
Yeah.
that really well.
I was really impressed with Striking Distance, their work on Callisto Protocol. They had they did a submission to the VES Awards, the Visual Effects Society Awards this year, and they really like showcased the character animation that they did, and man, was it fucking phenomenal. It was
Nice.
really well done. They showed the stand-ups, or not the stand-ups, but the model sheets where they showed the photo of the person and the in-engine render, and like you could not tell the difference. It was
Nice.
identical. Um, but something gets lost in gameplay, in composition and lighting. Like you kind of expect in a movie things are going to be, if there's rendered humans these days, you expect them to be pretty much photoreal, and it's just something happens, right? I think partly, in a game, except for the FM, the cutscene, whatever, it could be in engine or pre-rendered or whatever, but um, you know, in a video game, the player is the camera, right? So you can't stage like the composition, the little hair light, the bounce card, all that
Uh-huh.
stuff you get in film is just not present when you're playing a video game. Do you think that's I don't know. I don't know that there ever is a remedy to that, right?
I sort of agree. I think
Mhm.
there are. I can think of. I think this specific area is a place where games haven't realized how close they've come to being in line with film, and so it's sort of an old approach of how how all this stuff is set up. Oh, we'll pick maybe a designer will move the camera to where they think it'll be, and maybe not even talk to somebody who knows cameras, but there with the amount of control that we can take at this point, you could apply film techniques if you knew to do that. And so like the first example I think of is like in like a Gears of War type game. If you're running around third person camera, and obviously the player's got control, and you can't light the character for that. But when you go into like a ADS and you're like over their shoulder, like this, we can decide exactly where that is. We could put
Yeah.
we could put a light right next to it, and like we could actually rim light the character a bit, if any, like if the lighting person is even involved in the conversation. And I think that's part of the thing that like we have a lot of. I mean, this is a whole thing I could go off on, but uh,
Yeah, dude.
there's a lot of like old school things that used to be good enough that aren't good enough anymore, and that can be for everything from like I mean I've seen be careful here, but I've seen cinematic budgets that are like, this is really cool for like 2 generations ago, and then you realize like when like, oh, this person was in the trenches 2 generations ago, they didn't realize the times moved on, or like, you know, your grandpa who worked on diesel tractors, looking under the hood of a 2023 AMG, and it's like, oh yeah, I know how to fix this. Like, I don't know if you do. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's the techniques. I mean, this is, we could go into a whole thing about the scalability of AAA, but like a lot of, if you're just making a PS5 game the same way that you made a PS1 game, but throwing more money at it, like that's rough. Like, and you're not going to hit the quality target, and you're going to burn a lot of money, and you're just not. things that didn't matter back then because they're easy to redo, or like let's make a new character model in a day because they're 400 polygons. Um,
Yeah.
those decisions have a lot more consequences now. That was
Yeah.
like 3 different compound rants in answer to a totally different question. But
And,
yeah,
and
I
like,
think there's some in first person we have control over staging too, to a degree, but
yeah.
that's one, like, people would ask a lot about first person animation and like if we use mocap, and I was like, no, because what you're trying to do is animate to this space here.
Yeah.
And so either you get a professional who has the muscle memory to not even look, and so you're like, oh shit, what just happened? There's a reload animation, but it's like way below the camera.
Yeah.
Or you got an actor who doesn't know how to use a gun, and they're like, ugh, so there's not. I haven't found a great way to do it. Maybe people have. I'm sort of out of that game now anyway. But that was like 4 compound rants. Yeah, so.
Yeah, like back to one of those rants too. I think about, like, you mentioned lighters, right? They're involved in the process. That's an important part of it. Like, if in a sort of test environment you can match a character to a photo, but during gameplay, lighters are going to be involved in lighting the environments, and they're going to be involved in lighting the little cinematic moments that are in the game. But I don't know if a lot of studios that have lighters responsible for like a lighting rig for the character as gameplay is going on. I don't know that that's even a thing, is it?
I don't know. I think it could be a thing, but I think it's one of those, like, did anybody think to invite them into the room? I would imagine there are lighters out there in games who are like, why didn't they attach a light to this character? Especially in any kind of like in-game cinematic, like, or just have like a dim light to the face, just a little bit of a fill light that you can see something. And I think usually those things happen because the lighter was never invited to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think about, and neither of us are lighting.
Yeah. Let's just talk about lighting the rest of the time. Just like a funny anecdote about lighting, and you missed one thing on my credits, and this is very important. I worked on the Green Lantern movie for 2 months.
Okay.
And it's a joke, but the joke that we would tell working on that, as we were working on it, it's like everything the animators do looks like a video game. And like when we're done, it looks like a video game because we got gray, matte, default textures in Maya, and then we hand it to lighting, and after lighting, that's when it looks like a movie.
Yeah.
And that's like a lesson that I think a lot of games haven't learned yet. It's like it's in the materials and the lighting if you want people to buy it.
For sure.
Obviously the movement too, but like that's not enough.
I also have one movie credit.
Yeah?
I worked on the Dungeons and Dragons movie from 2007 or 11 or whatever it was.
The one with Damon Wayans?
Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, there's another crazy full circle dumb coincidence. My wife now dated the lead actor of that movie when it was filming back then.
Nice.
And that movie kind of bombed, and now I'm a huge D&D fanatic. I play all the time.
Yeah.
All right, back to animation stuff.
Okay.
Animation tech has come a long way since the early days of just hand animating kind of primitive cycles to these days the bar is full on-stage performance capture with facial, body, and sound all at once, so you can sort of get that unified performance. Tell us about what animation tech that's new or incoming, or that you imagine might be incoming, that could sort of excite you about like sort of the future of animation in games. How do you think we get to sort of the next level? Is it AI? Are there new tools out there that are sort of breaking new ground? What's sort of the coolest, hottest stuff out there right now?
It's funny, like I had a version of this conversation recently. I mean, I think it's not there's not any one tech. I mean, there was the last few years people have talked a lot about motion matching. Some games have shipped with motion matching, and it's good, and it makes a lot of like base locomotion better. Um,
And just what's motion matching? Describe that for those
yeah,
who aren't.
okay, motion matching. This so the dirty thing that AI did was stole machine learning and turn it into something else. And so, well, it stole a lot of things, but machine learning is the foundation of AI and large language models and generative AI and all that stuff. So, machine learning is it's basically like you take a huge pool of animation and you feed it into the machine, and it sort of guesses based on a certain amount of inputs and trajectories and things like that, and the current pose and position and speed and things like that, where what's probably going to happen next. And so it's like that autocomplete that ChatGPT is, but it's that for motion. So the
Right.
more animation you feed it, well, this is early on we thought it was the more animation you feed it, the more robust of a solution it's going to have. Um, Now that has been met with the realities of production in that, like, actually, if you do that, you don't have a lot of authorship over how the character moves. Do you really want 10 minutes of running forward, or do you want 10 seconds that's really really good, that when you're pressing forward it's like, oh yeah, this is a cycle, and it's a longer cycle, so we don't see the loops and stuff like that. But like, you don't want it just playing 10 minutes of unsorted mocap that was impossible to clean up. So
Yeah.
that's what motion matching is, and there's a ton of value in it. I think it's like a lot of studios are still trying to crack it. Um, some have, but there are there are ways that it still falls apart. Like, it's really good for edge case stuff. Of like, I haven't gotten to prove this theory myself, but I feel like it's really good at the edge cases of things that where like a bad animation would happen, where it'll do better. Like, I am
Yeah.
running and I stop and I change direction 135 degrees. Like, that would be, or 45 or whatever. Robust turns, or into at 90 degrees and out at 135, or things that's like weird angle coverage, or even on one thing working on this, we captured what's called Zoolander turns, when a character is turning more than 180 degrees. That,
Okay.
like, just basically giving it as much data as it can possibly handle, but then using that in the sort of edge cases of things where it's like, normally we just accept that animation looks shitty. Can we swear on this? I don't.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
All
Shit damn. Okay. Yeah. So motion matching is one of them. Now it doesn't. This, it kind of gets into like where AI is maybe not the solution for a lot of things. Is that it will predict the pose based on the inputs of. It'll predict the next animation based on the inputs that it currently has. What it doesn't have is the intent of the player, of like, what were they probably trying to do when they press these buttons. And so that's where
Yeah.
the animator has hopefully the good sense of like, oh, they probably meant to stop, even though the thumbstick went forward a little bit and backwards, but what they really meant to do is just like get it back to zero. And so we don't
Yeah.
want to like, huh, huh. We meant them to stop. And so just things, or direction change might be one that, like, oh, there's an animation that's sort of right, but they want to change direction instantly, so we might tell it that even though that's not the next thing we want to see, is like, oh, I'm moving this way and I'm just going to pop to this direction change, and then it's like, I'm sort of, I know that it's going to look better done a certain way than maybe the next logical pose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then control rig is, I think, one of the other big ones that, like, Unreal is doing that. Ubisoft gave a talk about IK rigs like a few years ago at GDC, basically getting like, how do we get over the whole like everybody's the same height problem that a lot of games have.
Yeah.
Uh, Everybody's the same body type, like anything that we can use to not have to make a whole new explicit set of animations for a new character. That's all towards the future of animation.
Okay. One thing I was super impressed with at GDC this year was Unreal showed off a new machine learning
Mhm.
model for muscle deformation and skin movement that was fucking awesome. It
Yeah.
was so cool. 'Cause, I mean, most rigging in games, you have a mesh and a skeleton, and there's just rotations, and
Mhm.
you're sort of like blending how much of those, so you know you get weird pinching and stuff.
Maybe
But
you have
yeah,
to
they
twist
showed
joints
a
or
guy
helpers,
like
but
muscly guy doing all this stuff, and
yeah.
all the muscles were like flexing right. That was pretty fucking impressive.
So that's the other piece of the puzzle, in that like how we won't get characters looking great until characters deform great. And it's just like thinking like everything that is happening between my bone to my muscle to my skin to my shirt, like a lot's happening there.
Yeah.
And as long as these wrinkles are sculpted in,
Yeah.
and like nothing, like, and my shoulder isn't really a complex joint but a simple bone from my clavicle, and everything else is just kind of like there's not a scapula back here. And yeah, it's like getting all, and then you put a coat on and it's made of leather or it's made of down or whatever. It's like those are all like character rigging and animation is like that, and lighting are the big areas that's like why video games still don't look real.
Yeah, yeah. And I think about like cloth sim in film, right? These are like very computationally intensive things. We just don't have the horsepower to do in a 16 thousandths of a second.
Right.
So yeah, maybe I kind of see machine learning like these are little areas where it could kind of like just give us approximations that are better than we can deal with.
Yeah, and I'm not anti AI. I'm not anti machine learning. AI is the I did perform a song at GDC about AI.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. But no, it's not. It's like I don't think the Luddite approach is the right approach. Like there are things that it makes better 100%. It's just like train it on data you have. Easy enough. Using it to scrape, and so like things like machine learning deformation, like I'm willing to bet that Epic owns the data they trained it on. Totally fine.
Yeah. Not to go on a weird tangent, but I just became aware this week of some internet phenomena of like NPC streamers or something. Do you know about this?
I don't think I do.
I don't know. Maybe it seems super weird to me, but there's, what do they call them? I don't know, streaming people that pretend they're like NPCs in an idle cycle.
Oh,
and
yes.
You pay them money, and then they do an emoji, like a game anime. I'm like, oh no.
Oh god. Yeah.
It is so like.
Yeah, that was a real boomer moment.
Disturbing to me. I don't know what the hell. Where did this come from?
That was I couldn't finish any of the videos. It's like what, why? Turn it off. I don't. There was like, so early days of TikTok, there was when I don't even remember what that is, and my sense of time is obliterated from the last 3 years of not having a sense of time. But there was this young woman who did this whole like acting like a video game character. Not these weird emotes thing, but it was like she just had like a really interesting style of movement that was very much derived from video games, and people were like, "Oh, that's so cool."
And kind of like animation too, like anime or Disney, but like her like facial expressions. I thought that was really cool too. That was impressive.
It was, yeah. It was, but then like there was a little bit of like an animator undertone of like, is this like, are we such a one-note song that's like, oh, this is animation style, and that's sort of a thing too. So I mean, I think when we talk about like next steps in animation, like tech is going to do some really cool things, and we're going to see some really impressive things, but until we are making something that is like has a voice and an intent behind it that will drive the use of tech to something meaningful, we're not. I don't think we're on that trajectory in AAA. I think we are on that trajectory in the acceleration of tech and how easy it is for smaller teams to make bigger games, and just like how quickly that's changing.
Yeah.
But like someday soon, like a actor or animator or team of people with this intent will achieve something like this. That's like, here's Keanu Reeves and here's Pixar badass, and together they're making John Wick the video game. And one of the things that's super important, and they're not handing it off to a team. They're like, we're gonna make sure that this character plays like John Wick, moves like John Wick, and everything about it changes buttons, switches like John Wick would, and stuff like that. Like having that intention, I think is what's gonna do it. Like that's the line that we haven't crossed yet.
Yeah, for sure. Another like flavor of that I've wondered about too is like deep fakes in video games. Like right now it's something that you have to process, but as you know, like we're doing ray tracing now with DLSS and machine learning is upsampling it. Like it is not out of the question that like, and I saw someone ran a filter recently on an NVIDIA card of a driving game, and they functionally like I think it's called style transfer, where they style transferred footage of a car driving, and it made it look like photoreal, and I can see that being a thing for characters too. So like we animate the faces to you know make the words happen and get expression, but all of that essentially becomes function like a low res input to something that like turns it into like fully photoreal looking pixels. I don't know how far off that is, but like that's gonna happen.
That doesn't sound crazy at all. I mean, it's basically like you would use the game performance as a driver mesh for like the high-res performance. It's not like that different than like LA Noire, but if you had the, you know, I mean, I guess it's kind of different, but you would be using. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, if you have a blend shape is driving an actual like projection of an actor, and it's where the blends are machine learning driven and stuff like yeah, that could totally work.
Man, Ryan, tell us. We're gonna wind down in a minute. Tell us where you're working now, what you're up to. Yeah, give us what's going on with you these days.
Yeah, I'm the animation director at Undead Labs. So we're working on State of Decay 3, and there's zombies in it, and a bunch of other stuff I can't talk about.
All right, awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ryan. It's been a pleasure. I always love chatting with you.
Likewise.
I'd like to thank our executive producer, Martika Ibarra, our editor, Robert Burnett, and the entire Architects of Imagination team. Thank you guys for watching. This is Architects of Imagination.
Have you ever thought of doing like an Architects of Imagination song?
Ooh,
like,
maybe we should.
Architects of Imagination. We got people with really bad reputations, or like, you know, I don't know.